The date was set. The dress was perfect. Her mother and sister flew in to witness it. The church was packed, nearly 1,000 guests filling every pew, high-ranking officials and dignitaries among them, a projector displaying their love story behind them. Everything was perfect, until the image on the screen changed. Guests started whispering. Some turned away. The groom froze, and the bride, seconds from saying, "I do," turned to see what had stolen every eye in the room. What she saw destroyed her. What happened next would shatter more than a ceremony. Some weddings end with a kiss. This one ended with a question no one could answer. Welcome to Crime Deck. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications, because what comes next will make you question everything you think you know about trust. Now let's go back to where this truly began. Years before anyone stepped into that church. 6 months before that church went silent, Hannah Reed was the kind of woman people pointed to as proof that hard work pays off. December 2018, Atlanta, Georgia. She worked for a mid-sized marketing firm downtown, the kind of place where promotions went to people who showed up early and stayed late. And Hannah did both. Her desk was always organized. Her presentations always polished. When clients asked for her by name, her boss noticed. When her boss noticed, her salary went up. She wasn't flashy about it. She didn't post about every win. But people knew. Co-workers called her reliable. Managers called her ambitious. And when she walked into a room, she carried herself like someone who'd earned every inch of space she occupied. What they didn't know was that confidence wasn't natural. It was constructed. Every smile, every handshake, every carefully chosen word. Because Hannah had learned early that the best way to hide your past is to build a future so bright no one thinks to look back. And then she met Michael Carter, January 2019, a charity fundraiser at a community center in Buckhead. He was there representing his church. She was there representing her firm. They ended up at the same table during dinner, and when he laughed at something she said, it wasn't polite laughter, it was real. He was the kind of man mothers pray their daughters bring home. Deacon at his church, close with his family, the type who opened doors and meant it when he asked how your day was. He didn't drink, didn't curse, didn't have a wandering eye. His parents had been married for 34 years, and he talked about them the way people talk about legends. He wanted what they had, a partnership, a foundation, something that lasted. And when he looked at Hannah, he saw someone who wanted the same thing. But here's what Michael didn't see. He didn't see the nights Hannah stayed up rehearsing answers to questions he might ask about her past. He didn't see her delete old social media accounts from college. He didn't see the way she flinched, just slightly, whenever he mentioned meeting her family. Because Hannah wasn't lying to him. She just wasn't telling him everything. And there's a difference. At least that's what she told herself. Their relationship moved the way good things are supposed to move. Steady, intentional. Without the chaos she'd spent years trying to escape. They went to couples Bible study on Wednesday nights. They volunteered at food drives on Saturdays. His mother loved her. His father shook her hand like she was already family. By March, people at church were asking when he'd propose. By April, he did. A sunset on Stone Mountain. A ring his grandmother had worn. Thin gold band with a single diamond that caught the light just right. Hannah cried, and for once, they were happy tears. She posted the photos online that night. The comments came fast. You two are perfect. This is what love looks like. God's timing is always right. She sat on her couch reading them, Michael asleep beside her, his hand resting on her knee, and she smiled. But if you look closely, really looked, the smile didn't quite reach her eyes, because Hannah knew something those commenters didn't. She knew the life people admired wasn't a lie. It was real. The love was real. The happiness was real. But it wasn't the whole story. There were parts of her Michael had never asked about, parts she'd never offered. And she believed, truly believed, that some chapters don't need to be reread once you survive them. Wedding planning started in May. Venues, caterers, floral arrangements. Her mother, Patricia, and her sister, Emily, flew in from out of state to help. Everything was falling into place. Everything was exactly as it should be. Hannah had built something real, something good, something worth protecting. And she believed, truly believed, that the past only has power if you give it permission to follow you. She'd left hers behind years ago, buried it, moved on. To understand what happened in that church, you have to go back further. Years before Atlanta, years before Michael, before Hannah Reed became the woman everyone admired. Back to when she was just a college student trying to hold her family together while everything around her fell apart. Her father died when she was 17 from a sudden heart attack. No warning. One day he was there, the next he wasn't. Her mother, Patricia, remarried within a year, not for love, but for survival. The man's name was Robert Hale, and he paid the bills. That's what mattered, or at least that's what Patricia told herself. But Robert wasn't her father, and he made that clear in ways that made Hannah's skin crawl. He'd stand too close when she came home from school, let his hand linger on her shoulder a little too long, made comments about what she wore that no stepfather should ever make. Hannah told her mother once, just once. Patricia's face went tight, not angry at Robert, but scared, because confrontation meant instability, and instability meant losing the house, losing the health insurance, losing the only thing keeping them afloat. So Patricia made a choice. She stayed quiet, and she expected Hannah to do the same. That's the first lesson Hannah learned. Silence keeps roofs overhead, and confrontation costs more than you can afford. Fast forward to 2015. Hannah's in college now at the University of Georgia, majoring in communications, working 2 part-time jobs to cover what her loans don't. Her younger sister Emily is still in high school, living at home with Patricia and Robert. And then the call comes. March 2015. Emily's been having headaches and blurred vision. She goes to the doctor and they find a mass, a brain tumor. It's benign, but it's growing. Surgery is urgent. Without it, Emily could lose her vision, maybe worse. The hospital estimates come back, and even with insurance, the out-of-pocket costs hit 6 figures. Deductibles, co-pays, specialists, recovery care. Patricia doesn't have it. Hannah doesn't have it. So Patricia does what she's always done. She asks Robert for help, and Robert says no with 4 words that Hannah will never forget. She's not my blood. Patricia breaks, not loud, but quiet, the kind of breaking that happens when you've already used up all your fight just to stay alive. Emily panics because she's 16, and she doesn't understand why the man who's lived in their house for years won't help save her life. And Hannah? Hannah doesn't cry. She doesn't rage. She gets calculating because that's what happens when you grow up learning that emotions are expensive and no one's coming to save you. You save yourself. She doesn't set up a GoFundMe or ask strangers on the internet to fund her sister's surgery. She doesn't pray harder or wait for a miracle. She asks her best friend for advice. Her name was Lauren Miles. They'd met freshman year, roommates who became sisters. Lauren was the kind of friend who'd stay up with you when you couldn't sleep, who'd share her last meal when you were broke. And when Hannah told her about Emily, about the tumor, about Robert's refusal, Lauren didn't judge. She suggested something modern, practical, and quiet. OnlyFans. Not as a joke, not said lightly, but as a real option. No strip clubs, no physical contact, no danger. Just content, subscriptions, and money that came in fast. Hannah had never even considered it before. But when Lauren explained how it worked, how anonymous it could be, how quickly the money could add up, something shifted. This wasn't about empowerment, and it wasn't about desperation either. It was calculation. Cold, clear, and necessary. So she did it. April 2015. She set up an account using a pseudonym and a separate email address that had nothing to do with her real name. Lauren had an old Samsung Galaxy she wasn't using anymore, and Hannah borrowed it, using it only for this, never syncing it to her real accounts, never letting it touch her actual life. She kept her face out of frame as much as she could because angles mattered, lighting mattered. Sometimes parts of her face still showed, a jawline, the curve of her cheek, but never the whole thing. Never enough to be certain. She posted, deleted, and posted again. Subscribers came. Money came. She treated it like a second job, emotionless and transactional. She'd film content late at night when her roommates were asleep, upload it, turn off the phone, and go to class the next morning like nothing had happened. But the costs kept stacking up. Emily's surgery happened in June, and it went well. The tumor was removed. Her vision would recover. But then came the follow-up appointments, The physical therapy, the medications, the monitoring scans. Every time Hannah thought she could stop, another bill arrived. So she kept going. April turned into May, May into June, June into July. The account stayed active through the summer and into the fall semester. By the time she finally had enough to cover everything, not just the surgery, but the recovery, the aftercare, the peace of mind that Emily would be okay. It was December 2015. 8 months. That's how long it took. When the final payment cleared, Hannah sat in her dorm room staring at the phone. 8 months of content, hundreds of files, and she did what she'd been waiting to do since April. She shut the account down, deleted all the posts, or thought she did, and gave the phone back to Lauren. She never checked what was still on it, never thought to, and never spoke about it again. Not to her mother, not to Emily, not to anyone. Here's the part that made it easier to forget. She didn't feel like a victim. She didn't feel exploited. She felt like someone who'd done what needed to be done and survived it. And she believed, truly believed, that once something disappeared from the internet, it stayed gone. That you could close a chapter of your life just by deciding it was over. Lauren Miles was the friend who showed up when no one else did. The one who stayed up with Hannah during those awful nights in 2015 when Emily's diagnosis felt like the end of the world. When Hannah couldn't see a way forward, Lauren handed her one. No judgment, no hesitation, just a solution wrapped in practicality and trust. They'd met during freshman orientation at the University of Georgia, randomly assigned as roommates in a cramped dorm on the east side of campus. Lauren was from a small town in South Carolina, the kind of place where everyone knew your business before you did. She'd come to college to escape that, to build something bigger than what her hometown offered. And Hannah? Hannah was just trying to survive her first year away from a home that had stopped feeling safe the moment Robert Hale moved in. They bonded over late-night takeout and shared frustration with professors who didn't remember their names. Lauren was the kind of friend who'd lend you her last $20 without asking when you'd pay it back, who'd cover for you when you overslept, who'd sit with you in the hospital waiting room when your little sister was going under the knife. When Hannah needed help in 2015, Lauren didn't flinch. She offered the phone, explained how OnlyFans worked, and never once made Hannah feel small for doing what she had to do. For years, that's who Lauren was. The safest person in Hannah's life. The only one who knew the full truth and never weaponized it. But something shifted when Hannah moved to Atlanta in early 2018. It was subtle at first, easy to miss if you weren't paying attention. Lauren stayed behind in Georgia, working a string of low-paying jobs that never quite turned into careers. She dated men who made promises they didn't keep. And while Hannah's life started to take shape, new job, new city, new opportunities, Lauren seemed to stall out. That summer, Lauren met a man named Derek at a bar in Athens. He was older, charming, and married. He told her he was leaving his wife. He told her a lot of things. And Lauren, lonely and wanting to believe someone saw value in her, believed him. By August 2018, she was pregnant. Derek stopped answering her calls the moment the test came back positive. His promises evaporated overnight. She had the baby alone in April 2019. A little girl she named Clara. Suddenly, her world shrank to the size of a one-bedroom apartment with cracked tiles and a landlord who didn't fix the heat. No partner, no support. Just her and a newborn and bills that kept piling up. Meanwhile, Hannah's life kept expanding. In January 2019, she'd started dating Michael Carter, a deacon at his church, the kind of man people called a blessing. By April, the same month Lauren gave birth alone in a hospital room, Hannah was posting engagement photos online. New apartment in Buckhead, a ring that caught the light just right, a fiancé whose family treated her like she was already one of them. And that's when Lauren's texts started to change. Not dramatically, but enough. "Have you told him?" she'd ask. "You know this could ruin everything." "I would never keep a secret like that from someone I love." Hannah would reassure her over the phone, her voice calm, measured. "It's not lying, Lauren. It's just not relevant anymore. That was survival. This is my life now." Lauren wouldn't argue. She'd say something supportive, tell Hannah she deserved to be happy, congratulate her on the engagement. But if you listened closely, really closely, the warmth in her voice had gone flat. The congratulations felt like they were being read off a script. Because while Hannah was picking out wedding venues and floral arrangements, Lauren was up at 2 in the morning with a screaming infant, trying to figure out how to pay for diapers and formula on a paycheck that barely covered rent. She'd done everything right, hadn't she? She'd gone to church growing up. She'd been the loyal friend. She'd helped Hannah when no one else would. And what did she have to show for it? A baby with no father, a job that led nowhere, a future that felt like it had already been decided and discarded. Hannah, on the other hand, had done something people would call shameful, something she'd hidden from everyone, including the man she was about to marry. And she was thriving. It wasn't fair. That's the thought that started creeping in. Not loud, not violent, just persistent. Why do people who hide things get everything, while people who tell the truth end up with nothing? Lauren told herself it wasn't jealousy. It was just observation, just accounting. She wasn't angry at Hannah. She was just trying to understand the math. But late at night, when Clara finally fell asleep and the apartment went quiet, Lauren would pull out the old Samsung Galaxy she'd lent Hannah back in 2015. The one Hannah had given back without ever checking what was still saved on it. And she'd scroll through the files, the videos, the images that were supposed to be deleted, but never were. She didn't know what she was looking for. Not yet. But she knew one thing. Hannah had built her perfect life on a secret. If you're still watching, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because Crime Deck covers the cases that make you rethink everything you thought you knew about loyalty and trust. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. And here's the question I want you to ask yourself. When someone helps you through your darkest moment, what do you owe them? Leave your answer in the comments. Wedding planning started the week after the engagement photos went live. Hannah threw herself into it with the kind of focus people use when they're trying to prove something, not just to everyone else, but to themselves. She wanted everything perfect. The flowers, the seating chart, the music, every single detail mapped out and controlled. Not because she cared about impressing people, but because she needed proof. Proof that she'd moved on. Proof that this version of her life was real and permanent and untouchable. She kept Lauren updated on everything. Text messages with photos of floral arrangements, late-night calls asking which color scheme felt more elegant, video chats showing off cake samples. Hannah didn't mean it as cruelty. She genuinely wanted her best friend involved. Wanted Lauren to feel like she was part of this. Like the distance between their lives hadn't grown as wide as it actually had. But every update felt like salt in a wound Lauren didn't know how to heal. She'd be up at 3 in the morning with Clara screaming in her arms, her phone lighting up with another message from Hannah. "What do you think of these centerpieces?" And Lauren would stare at the screen, exhausted, covered in spit up, her body still aching from childbirth. And she'd type back something supportive, because that's what friends do. In mid-May, Hannah asked if Lauren could help with something specific. The reception slideshow, photos of her and Michael set to music, playing on a projector behind the head table during dinner. "I know you're good with tech stuff," Hannah said over the phone, her voice bright with excitement. "Could you help me put it together? I trust you with this." Lauren said yes. Of course she said yes. She always said yes to Hannah. And it wasn't entirely a lie. She did know how to work a projector, how to queue up files, how to make sure everything played in the right order. She told Hannah she'd handle it when she came into town for the wedding, that she'd set everything up the morning of, make sure it ran smoothly. Hannah was so grateful she almost cried. "You're the best, Lauren. I don't know what I'd do without you." The words landed wrong, not warm, not comforting, just heavy. Because Lauren was starting to realize something she couldn't admit out loud. She didn't want to be needed only when it was convenient. She didn't want to be the person Hannah called when she needed tech help or emotional support, only to be left behind when the real celebrating started. Late May, 2:30 in the morning, Lauren was feeding Clara in the dim light of her living room, the baby finally quiet after an hour of crying, when her phone rang. Hannah's name lit up the screen. "Hey!" Hannah's voice was soft, a little slurred. She'd been out with her bridesmaids, celebrating, drinking wine at someone's apartment. "I hope I didn't wake you." Lauren almost laughed. Wake her? She hadn't slept more than 2 hours straight in weeks. "No, I'm up. What's going on?" There was a pause. Then Hannah said something she probably wouldn't have said sober. Sometimes I wonder if he'd still love me if he knew everything. Lauren's hand tightened on the phone. Clara stirred in her arms but didn't cry. What do you mean? I keep thinking about it, about what I did, about whether I should tell him before the wedding, whether it's fair to keep it from him. This was the moment Lauren could have said, yes, you should tell him. He deserves to know. The moment she could have encouraged honesty, transparency, the kind of thing people claim to value. But instead, Lauren asked a different question. Then why are you marrying him? Silence on the other end, long enough that Lauren thought the call had dropped. Then Hannah's voice came back, quieter now. Because I love him, and because that part of my life is over. It doesn't define me anymore. Lauren didn't respond. She just sat there in the dark, holding her daughter, listening to Hannah rationalize a decision that felt less like moving forward and more like running away. They said goodnight a few minutes later. Hannah went back to her wine and her bridesmaids. Lauren sat in the quiet with Clara asleep against her chest, and that's when it fully crystallized. The thought she'd been circling for months, the one she kept telling herself wasn't real, wasn't fair, wasn't her place to act on. Hannah had built a perfect life on a hidden foundation, and Lauren was the only person who knew how fragile that foundation actually was. The old Samsung Galaxy was still in her apartment, sitting in the drawer of her desk where she'd been keeping it since Hannah gave it back in 2015. She'd been pulling it out late at night for weeks now, scrolling through the files, watching the videos Hannah thought were deleted. At first it was just curiosity, then resentment, then something colder, but she hadn't done anything with it. She just looked. Early June. Less than 2 weeks before the wedding. Lauren opened the drawer again, pulled out the phone, and this time she didn't just scroll. She connected it to her laptop, backed up every file, every video, every image, saved them in 3 different places to make sure they couldn't disappear. She told herself she wasn't sure what she was going to do with them yet, that she was just being careful, just preserving something that might matter later. But deep down, she knew. She'd already made the decision. She just hadn't admitted it out loud. She sat there in the glow of her laptop screen, Clara asleep in the crib across the room, and she felt something she hadn't felt in months. Control. For the first time since Derek left, since Clara was born, since her life stopped making sense, Lauren felt like she had power over something that mattered. Hannah had a secret, and Lauren had proof. June 14th, 2019. 3:45 p.m. The church was packed. Nearly 1,000 people filled every pew, dressed in their best, some of them city officials, business leaders, people whose presence alone made the day feel important. Hannah's mother, Patricia, sat in the front row on the left, her sister Emily beside her, both wearing pale blue dresses Hannah had chosen for them. Michael's parents sat across the aisle, his mother already dabbing at her eyes with a tissue, his father's hand resting on her shoulder. The sanctuary smelled like lilies and fresh linen. Sunlight poured through the stained glass windows, casting soft colors across the altar. Everything was perfect. Everything Hannah had planned, controlled, and prayed over for months had come together exactly as it was supposed to. She stood at the front in a dress that fit like it was made for this exact moment, her hand trembling slightly in Michael's, not from fear but from the kind of joy that feels too big to hold. The pastor smiled at them, his voice warm and steady as he began. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today." Behind them, the projector hummed softly, cycling through photos. Hannah and Michael at Stone Mountain during the proposal, the two of them laughing at a charity dinner. A candid shot someone took of them holding hands at church. Images that told a story everyone in that room believed. A love built on honesty, a future built on faith. And then the image changed. It didn't happen gradually. 1 second there was a photo of Hannah and Michael smiling at the camera. The next there was a bedroom, dim lighting. A camera angle that left no room for misinterpretation. And then her, on a screen 20 feet wide, visible to every single person in that sanctuary. The sound came next. Not loud but clear enough. A few people in the back gasped. Someone near the middle whispered, "Oh my God." Michael's grip on Hannah's hands went slack. She felt it before she saw it. The way his fingers loosened. The way his whole body went rigid. She turned, slowly. The way you turn when you already know what you're going to see, but your brain hasn't caught up yet. And there it was. Her. Doing something she did 4 years ago to save her sister's life. Now playing in front of nearly 1,000 people. In front of Michael's parents. In front of her mother. In front of dignitaries and church leaders and people who would never forget what they saw. For 5 full seconds, no one stopped it. Not the pastor, not the sound tech, not anyone. Some people stared. Some covered their mouths. Some turned to their neighbors like they needed confirmation that this was real. And some just watched. Hannah's vision blurred. The room tilted. She tried to take a breath, but her chest wouldn't move. And then everything went black. She collapsed, her body hitting the floor hard. The sound of her fall lost in the murmur of 1,000 people trying to process what they were seeing. Michael stood frozen, not because he didn't love her, not because he was angry, but because everyone was watching him, his parents, his church, the people who respected him, who saw him as a leader, who expected him to make the right choice in front of a room full of witnesses. And in that moment, standing at an altar with 1,000 eyes on him, watching his fiancé unconscious on the floor, and a video of her past playing on a loop behind him, he made the only choice his fear would let him make. He walked away, not slowly, not hesitantly. He turned and walked down the aisle, his footsteps echoing in a silence so complete it felt like the building itself was holding its breath. Hannah lay unconscious on the floor in her wedding dress, the video still playing behind her, and not a single person knelt down to check if she was breathing. Her mother, Patricia, sat frozen in the front row, her hands gripping the edge of the pew. Emily beside her just stared, her face pale, unable to move. And near the back, standing close to the tech table where the projector was still running, Lauren Miles held her daughter Clara against her chest and watched the whole thing unfold with a face that showed no surprise at all. Then the security team moved. 2 men in dark suits rushed toward the altar, pushing through the stunned crowd. One of them knelt beside Hannah, checking her pulse, lifting her head gently. "She's breathing," he called out. "Someone get water. Call an ambulance." The other radioed for help, his voice low and urgent. But the video kept playing, over and over, the same footage cycling on the massive screen while people pulled out their phones, while whispers turned into full conversations, while the church that had felt sacred minutes ago turned into something else entirely. Hannah started to come around slowly, her eyelids fluttering, a soft moan escaping her lips as consciousness crept back. The security guard leaning over her spoke quietly. "Ma'am, can you hear me? You're okay. Just breathe." And that's when someone from the media team finally moved. A young man near the sound booth, his face stricken, lunged for the laptop controlling the projector and slammed it shut. The screen went black, but the damage was already done. The video had played for nearly 3 minutes. 3 minutes of 1,000 people watching. 3 minutes no one would ever forget. Hannah didn't need to ask. The moment she regained consciousness on that church floor, the moment her brain started processing what had just happened, she knew. Only one person had access to that content. Only one person had offered to handle the projector. Only one person knew exactly when to press play for maximum damage. She called Lauren the next morning. June 15th, 10:23 a.m. Her voice was raw from crying, her hands still shaking. "It was you." Lauren didn't hesitate, didn't pretend to be shocked or confused. She just said, "Yes." The silence that followed felt like falling. Hannah had expected denial, maybe even an apology wrapped in excuses. But Lauren's calm confirmation hit harder than the exposure itself. "Why?" Hannah's voice cracked. "I did that for Emily. You knew that. You were there. You helped me." Lauren's response came smooth and cold, like she'd been rehearsing it for weeks. If the truth destroys something, maybe it was never real to begin with. Hannah couldn't breathe. "That's not truth. That's cruelty. You humiliated me in front of 1,000 people. You destroyed my wedding. You got to be the hero." Lauren cut her off. "You got to save your sister. You got to move on. You got to build this perfect life while I'm sitting here alone with a baby whose father won't even return my calls. What did I get, Hannah? What did I get for helping you?" That's when Hannah understood. This wasn't about honesty or morality or protecting Michael from a lie. This was about punishment. Lauren didn't want the truth to set anyone free. She wanted it to level the playing field, to drag Hannah down into the same kind of life Lauren was trapped in. She wanted redistribution. Hannah hung up, blocked the number, and for days she sat in her apartment, wondering if her life would ever feel normal again. Her mother had stopped answering her calls. Emily sent one text, "I can't talk to you right now." The church had released a statement distancing themselves from the ceremony. The video was already circulating online in corners of the internet. She'd never be able to scrub clean. And then, on the 8th day, there was a knock on her door, June 22nd, just after 8 p.m. She opened it and found Michael standing there, his eyes red, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. He didn't say anything at first, just looked at her like he was trying to remember why he'd walked away in the first place. "I'm sorry," he finally said. Not for what she did, for leaving her on that floor. They talked for hours. He admitted he'd been ashamed, not of her but of himself. Ashamed that his first instinct had been to protect his reputation instead of the woman he claimed to love. They cried, they sat in silence. And by the time he left that night, they'd made a decision. A small wedding, private, just the two of them and an officiant. No guests, no performance. No one to judge or witness or ruin. They set the new date for 3 weeks later, July 12th. But somehow, Lauren found out. Hannah didn't know how. Maybe Michael mentioned it to someone. Maybe word traveled through mutual friends. But in late June, Lauren showed up at Hannah's apartment building unannounced. Hannah saw her through the window and didn't answer the door. Lauren knocked for 10 minutes straight, then left. The text started that night. "You don't deserve him. You think you can just move on like nothing happened? You haven't learned anything." Hannah blocked the number again. Lauren got a new one. The messages kept coming. Different number, same words. "I can see your lights on. I know you're in there. This isn't over." Early July, just days before the private wedding, Hannah woke up at 2 a.m. to use the bathroom. She glanced out her bedroom window and froze. There was a car parked across the street. Engine off, headlights dark, and in the driver's seat, barely visible in the glow of a streetlight, was Lauren. Just sitting there, staring up at the building, her hands gripping the steering wheel, not moving, not leaving, just watching. Hannah stepped back from the window, her heart pounding, and for the first time since the church, she felt something worse than humiliation. She felt fear. Hannah stopped going to the window after that night. Seeing Lauren sitting in that car, just watching, had shaken something loose in her she couldn't put back. She kept the blinds closed, double-checked the locks, started sleeping with her phone on the nightstand. 911 already pulled up on the screen, her thumb one tap away from calling for help. Michael suggested she stay with him until the wedding, but Hannah refused. She wasn't going to let Lauren chase her out of her own home. She'd already lost so much. Her wedding, her family, her sense of safety. She wasn't giving up her apartment too. July 9th, 2019, 3 nights before the private ceremony. Hannah was packing for a weekend trip she and Michael had planned, just 2 days away from Atlanta to clear their heads before starting over. She was folding a sweater when she heard it. Not a knock, a scraping sound, metal against metal. The lock on her front door turning. Her body went cold. She'd locked that door. She always locked it. But the handle was moving, turning slowly, and then the door opened and Lauren stepped inside. Hannah's breath caught. Lauren wasn't frantic. She wasn't screaming. She was calm, too calm. And in her hand, hanging at her side, was a gun. Hannah's voice came out barely above a whisper. "Lauren, what are you doing?" Lauren closed the door behind her with her foot, her movements slow and deliberate, like she had all the time in the world. She looked at Hannah with eyes that held nothing. No anger, no sadness, just emptiness. "You were supposed to lose everything." Lauren's voice was quiet, almost flat. "Why do you still get to be happy?" Hannah raised her hands slowly, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. "Lauren, please, just put the gun down. We can talk." But Lauren wasn't there to talk. She wasn't angry. She wasn't crying. She was just done. Done watching Hannah rebuild. Done being the only one who remembered what Hannah had done. Done seeing her move forward while Lauren stayed stuck in a life that kept getting smaller. She raised the gun. The sound came before Hannah could process what was happening. A crack that tore through the room and sent her stumbling backward, her hand flying to her stomach where the pain exploded hot and sharp. She hit the floor hard, gasping, her vision going white at the edges. Lauren didn't move. She just stood there, the gun still in her hand, watching. Next door, Hannah's neighbor bolted upright at the sound. He knew what a gunshot sounded like. He grabbed his phone and dialed 911, his hands shaking. Gunshot, apartment 4B. I think someone's been shot. You need to send help right now. The operator's voice came through calm and controlled. Sir, are you safe? I don't know. Just send someone, please. Police arrived in under 4 minutes. They came in fast, guns drawn, shouting commands, but there was nothing to stop. Lauren was sitting on the couch, the gun resting on the cushion beside her. She didn't run, didn't resist. She just sat there, staring at nothing, waiting. Hannah was on the floor, conscious but fading, her hand pressed against the wound, blood pooling beneath her. The paramedics moved in immediately, applying pressure, checking her pulse, loading her onto a stretcher. She was losing blood fast, but she was breathing. That was something. One of the officers knelt in front of Lauren, his voice hard. Why did you do this? Lauren looked up at him, her face blank, like the answer was obvious. She got away with it. I couldn't let that happen. They cuffed her and let her out. She didn't fight, didn't say another word. She just walked. Hannah was rushed into surgery. The bullet had entered her lower abdomen, narrowly missing major organs but causing severe internal bleeding. The surgical team worked for 3 hours to stabilize her. By the time they moved her to recovery, the sun was coming up over Atlanta. Michael arrived just after 6 a.m. His face was pale, his hands wouldn't stop shaking. They let him in even though visiting hours hadn't started. She was unconscious, hooked to machines that beeped in steady rhythms, tubes running from her arms, an oxygen mask covering her face. Her chest rose and fell in shallow movements that looked too fragile to last. He pulled a chair close and took her hand, careful not to disturb the IV taped to her wrist. His face held everything at once, love and fear and shame and guilt. He'd walked away from her once, left her alone on that church floor while 1,000 people watched. And now she was here, fighting to survive, because he hadn't protected her. Because someone had decided she didn't deserve to be happy. He didn't let go of her hand. Not when the nurses came to check her vitals. Not when the doctor explained the damage. Not when hours passed and she still didn't wake. He just sat there, holding on, whispering words he wasn't sure she could hear. If you're still watching, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because Crime Deck tells the stories that stay with you long after they're over. Share this with someone who needs to understand how quickly loyalty can turn into something dangerous. And here's what I want you to think about. At what point does someone's pain stop being an explanation and become an excuse? Drop your answer in the comments below. The detectives assigned to the case started working the moment Lauren was booked. July 10th, early morning. Lead Detective Sarah Brennan sat in a conference room at the Atlanta Police Department with her partner, Marcus Hayes, laying out what they had so far. It wasn't everything yet, but it was enough to see the shape of what had happened. They pulled Lauren's phone first. The text messages came through within hours of securing the warrant. Dozens of texts sent to Hannah over the past 3 weeks, some from Lauren's number, others from burner phones she'd purchased when Hannah blocked her. You don't deserve him. This isn't over. I can see your lights on. The timestamps showed messages sent at 2 a.m., 3 a.m., sometimes every hour through the night. The harassment was documented, undeniable. Then there was the old Samsung Galaxy. The phone Lauren had lent Hannah back in 2015. Forensics confirmed within the first day that it contained saved content, videos and images Hannah thought were deleted years ago. The full extraction and cataloging would take weeks, but they'd already seen enough. Lauren hadn't just kept the files, she'd backed them up in multiple locations on her laptop. This wasn't carelessness, this was preservation. Security footage from Hannah's apartment building came next. The building manager handed over weeks of recordings without hesitation. There was Lauren's car, time-stamped and clear, parked across the street on June 28th, July 2nd, July 5th, July 8th. Always late at night, always for hours, just sitting there, watching. But it was the journal that made Brennan stop and call Hayes over. They'd found it during the search of Lauren's apartment, tucked in a drawer beside the old phone. A black notebook, pages filled with handwriting that started neat in the early entries and grew messier as the months went on. March 2019. Hannah's engaged. I'm happy for her, I think. May 2019. She keeps sending me wedding updates like I'm supposed to celebrate. What about my life? June 2019. She doesn't get to have this. Not after what she did. Not when I'm the one who helped her. The entries got darker as they progressed. More specific. References to the wedding, to the projector, to making sure everyone knew the truth. And then, in early July, just days before the shooting, one line that made Brennan's blood go cold. If exposing her didn't work, what will? Over the next few days, detectives began reaching out to people who knew Lauren, friends from her hometown in South Carolina, co-workers from her last job in Athens, people from the church she used to attend. The interviews were still ongoing, but the pattern was already clear. Every single person described her the same way. Helpful, loyal, the kind of person who'd do anything for you. One woman told Hayes, "I can't believe Lauren would hurt anyone. She was always there when people needed her." But that was exactly the problem. Lauren had framed possession as devotion. Her obsession had looked like friendship for so long that the people around her never questioned it. They saw loyalty where there was actually control. And by the time the mask slipped, it was too late. The investigation uncovered something else that bothered Brennan. Phone records showed that Hannah had blocked Lauren's original number on June 20th. Nearly 3 weeks before the shooting, she'd sensed something was wrong, felt the danger building, but she'd never reported it, never called police, never filed for a restraining order. When Brennan sat down with Michael for his interview on July 11th, she asked him about it. He was still spending every hour he could at the hospital, leaving only when the nurses insisted. His face looked drawn, exhausted. She felt guilty, he said quietly when Brennan brought up the blocked number. Even after Lauren played that video, even after everything she did, Hannah still felt like she owed her, like cutting her off was some kind of betrayal. Brennan made a note. "You came back to her after the wedding, after you walked away in front of everyone. Can you tell me why?" Michael's jaw tightened. He stared at his hands for a long moment before answering. "I didn't come back because I forgave her for what she did years ago. I came back because I was more ashamed of abandoning her than I was of anything she'd hidden from me." He looked up, his eyes bloodshot. "I walked away in front of everyone. I can't take that back, but I can try to do better now." It wasn't a love story. It was a man trying to repair the damage he'd caused, trying to become someone better than the person he'd been in that church. 2 days after the shooting, Brennan and Hayes sat across from Lauren in the interrogation room. She'd been calm since her arrest, cooperative even. She'd waived her right to an attorney, said she had nothing to hide. She looked rested, like she'd been sleeping better in custody than she had in months. Brennan slid a photo across the table. Hannah in the hospital bed, unconscious, tubes running from her arms, machines monitoring every breath. "She survived," Brennan said, watching Lauren's face. "The bullet missed her vital organs. Doctors say she's going to recover fully." Lauren stared at the photo without blinking. Then she looked up, her expression blank. "I know." Hayes leaned forward, his voice controlled. "Do you regret what you did?" Lauren didn't hesitate, didn't look away, didn't show a flicker of emotion. She met his eyes and said, calm as anything, "I regret that she survived." The room went dead silent. Brennan's pen stopped moving. Hayes sat back slowly, exhaling through his nose. There was no remorse in Lauren's voice. No guilt. No trace of the woman people had described as helpful and loyal. Lauren wasn't sorry she'd pulled the trigger. She was sorry it hadn't finished what she'd started. January 2020. 6 months after the shooting. The trial moved faster than most attempted murder cases, pushed through by a prosecutor who knew the evidence was airtight and a defense attorney who couldn't find a way out. The courtroom in downtown Atlanta was packed on the day of sentencing. Journalists filling the back rows, sketch artists positioned near the front, everyone waiting to see what justice looked like for a woman who tried to kill her best friend. Lauren Miles sat at the defense table in a gray suit, her hands folded in front of her, her face calm. She'd been in custody since July, held without bail, and the months hadn't changed her. She looked the same as she had the night of her arrest. Unbothered. Certain. The charges were read aloud. Attempted murder, aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, burglary, use of a firearm in the commission of a felony. Her defense had argued temporary insanity, emotional breakdown, betrayal, trauma. They painted her as a woman pushed to the edge by watching someone she'd helped get everything while she lost it all. But the prosecution didn't need to work hard. They presented the journal entries, the backed-up files, the security footage showing her car outside Hannah's building night after night. They showed the text messages, the burner phones, the premeditation that stretched back weeks. This wasn't a moment of passion. This was planned. The jury deliberated for less than a day. When they returned, the four women stood and delivered the verdict without hesitation. Guilty, on all counts. The judge leaned forward, her reading glasses perched on her nose, and addressed Lauren directly. You had choices, Miss Miles. At every step, you had the opportunity to walk away. You didn't. Instead, you planned, you stalked, and you tried to take a life. The court sentences you to 20 to 25 years in state prison. Lauren didn't flinch, didn't cry. When given the chance to speak, she stood and looked directly at the gallery. She lied to everyone. I just made sure people knew the truth. No apology. No acknowledgement of what she'd done. Just the same justification she'd given in the interrogation room 6 months earlier. Hannah wasn't there. She was already heavily pregnant, 7 months along with twins, a discovery made during her treatment in the hospital after the shooting. She told Michael she couldn't sit in that courtroom, couldn't face Lauren again, not while carrying the children that had become her reason to keep moving forward. But Michael went. He sat in the back row, alone, his face unreadable. When it was over, when the bailiff led Lauren out in handcuffs and the courtroom started to empty, a reporter caught him on the steps outside. How do you feel about the verdict? She asked, shoving a microphone toward him. Michael stopped, looked at her and said, I don't know yet. Then he walked away. Inside, the courtroom emptied slowly. No one celebrated. No one felt relieved. The prosecutors packed their briefcases in silence. The defense attorney shook his head and left without comment. The gallery filed out, whispering to each other, but there was no sense of victory. Just exhaustion. Just the quiet weight of a story that didn't have a clean ending. Justice had been served, but it didn't fix anything. It didn't undo the wedding. It didn't erase the video still circulating online. It didn't bring back the family Hannah had lost or the trust that had been shattered. It just meant Lauren would be in prison, and Hannah would still be trying to figure out how to live with everything that had happened. Hannah's body healed faster than anyone expected. The bullet wound closed, the stitches came out, the doctors cleared her for physical activity within weeks. But the damage that mattered most never showed up on any scan. That lived somewhere deeper, in the part of her that used to believe people were fundamentally good. The pregnancy was discovered during her hospital stay in July, just days after the shooting. Twins. The news should have felt like a miracle, but all Hannah could think about was how close she'd come to losing them. How one bullet, a few inches in a different direction, would have ended 3 lives instead of nearly ending 1. Michael didn't hesitate. On a quiet afternoon in late July, while Hannah was still recovering, they got married in the hospital chapel. No guests, no music, just a chaplain, 2 witnesses pulled from the nursing staff, and vows spoken in whispers. It wasn't the wedding either of them had imagined, but it was theirs, and it was private. No one could take it from them. The twins were born in March 2020, a boy and a girl, healthy, perfect. Hannah held them for the first time and felt something she hadn't felt since before the church. Hope. But the people she expected to share that hope with stayed away. Patricia and Emily came to visit once in late spring. They brought gifts, made the appropriate comments about how beautiful the babies were, but the warmth Hannah remembered from childhood was gone. Patricia's smile didn't reach her eyes. Emily barely looked at her. Before they left, Patricia said something that Hannah would replay in her mind for years. I don't blame you for what you did. I blame you for lying about it. Emily didn't say anything. She just looked at Hannah, like she was someone she used to know. That's when Hannah understood. The people she'd sacrificed everything for were the ones who judged her the hardest. The sister whose life she'd saved couldn't see past the method. The mother who'd stayed silent when Robert crossed boundaries now had plenty to say about Hannah's choices. By summer 2020, Hannah and Michael moved to a new city. Somewhere smaller, quieter, where no one knew their names or their story. Hannah legally changed her last name, deleted every social media account, started over in the only way she knew how, by erasing the trail. But some things couldn't be erased. The OnlyFans video still circulated in corners of the internet she'd never be able to reach. She didn't look for it, but she knew it was there. Permanent, waiting for anyone curious enough to search. She didn't talk about the wedding, didn't talk about Lauren, didn't talk about any of it. But late at night, after Michael fell asleep, she'd pull out her phone and search the Georgia Department of Corrections inmate database. Just to check. Just to make sure Lauren was still locked up. She was. Every time. But the fear never left. Years later, Hannah stood in the doorway of her children's room, watching them sleep. 4 years old now. Safe. Loved. Unaware of the history that had shaped their existence. Her hand moved to her abdomen without thinking, fingers tracing the scar the bullet had left behind. It had faded, but it was still there. Always would be. She was grateful to be alive. Grateful for her children, grateful Michael had stayed. But she never felt safe. Not completely. Not anymore. Lauren sits in her cell at Pulaski State Prison, a stack of letters beside her on the narrow bed. They come every week. Sometimes more. People she's never met, writing to tell her she was brave. That she stood up for truth when no one else would. That Hannah deserved what happened. She reads them slowly, carefully, like they're proof of something she's always believed. That she wasn't wrong. That history will remember her differently than the jury did. 300 miles away, Hannah's twins are playing in a park. They're 4 years old now, running through fallen leaves, laughing at something only they understand. Michael watches from a bench nearby, his phone in his hand, scrolling through photos he can't seem to delete. Pictures from 2019, the engagement shoot, the venue tours, the life they were supposed to have. His finger hovers over the trash icon, but never presses it. He doesn't know why he keeps them. Maybe because forgetting feels like betraying the version of himself that believed love could be simple. Across town, Patricia and Emily sit at a dining table set for 4. There are only 2 of them. The extra chairs stay empty out of habit, not hope. Patricia passes the potatoes. Emily pours the wine. Neither of them mentions Hannah's name, but she's there anyway, present in every silence, every topic they avoid. Emily wonders sometimes if she should reach out, if enough time has passed, but then she remembers the video, the lies, the feeling of sitting in that church while strangers watched her sister on a screen, and the thought disappears. Hannah doesn't know about the letters Lauren receives, doesn't know her mother and sister still set a table like she might walk through the door. She's built a life designed to keep the past out, but it finds its way in anyway. In the scars she touches without thinking, in the way she flinches when someone stands too close. In the moments she catches herself wondering if her children will one day search her name online and find the video she can't erase. There's no lesson here that makes sense. No moral that ties it all together. Just people making choices that felt right at the time and living with consequences no one saw coming. Was the real harm the secret? Or the way it was weaponized? Does privacy exist anymore once something's been recorded? Is silence the same as survival? Or is it just another word for hiding? And what does it mean when the people you'd give everything for are the ones who can't forgive you? Some questions don't have answers. Some stories don't have endings that feel fair. This is one of them. If you were in that church that day, watching everything unfold, who would you have defended? That's the question that stays with you long after this story ends. Because the truth is, there are no clean answers here. Just people who made impossible choices and paid for them in ways no one could have predicted. Hannah did what she had to do to save her sister's life. Lauren couldn't let go of what that cost her. Michael walked away when he should have stayed, and a family fell apart because silence felt safer than honesty. This case forces us to ask questions we don't want to answer. When does survival become deception? When does loyalty turn into obsession? And how much of someone's past are they allowed to leave behind before it becomes lying? If this story made you uncomfortable, good. That means you were paying attention. These are the conversations we need to have, the ones that don't fit into neat categories of right and wrong. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because Crime Deck doesn't just tell you what happened. We make you think about why it matters. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it, because stories like this don't just happen in courtrooms. They happen in relationships, in families, in the quiet moments when people decide what they're willing to hide and what they're willing to forgive. Drop a comment below and tell me, do you think Hannah owed Michael the truth before they got engaged? Do you think Lauren's pain justified what she did? Or do you think everyone in this story is both right and wrong at the same time? This is Crime Deck. We cover the cases that stay with you, the ones that make you question everything you thought you knew about loyalty, truth, and the cost of survival. Don't forget to like this video, share it, and join the conversation. Because the most important part of any story is what happens after you hear it. Thanks for watching. And remember, sometimes the hardest question isn't what someone did. It's what you would have done in their place.